today we are blessed to have Matt Wilkinson joining us. And Matt, so thankful to have you. Matt's the director of Next Generation Ministries for the Canadian Baptist Churches of Ontario and Quebec, and he's also works at Camp. I'm going to mispronounce it. Quisinde, maybe.
Quasant.
Quasant. There you go. And also does some instruction at Tyndale University. And of course is the leader, co-director of the Today's Teens Conference, which is again another awesome opportunity to invest in yourself and your leaders. So Matt, thanks for being here. I'm going to turn the time over to you now, but blessings on you to share with us the best way we can, as youth workers, engage with camps. All you, Matt.
Well, Joey, thanks so much for the invite to be part of these Wednesday webinars, and for all those that have joined in on this, wonderful to be with you as we have the similar heart of how do we invest into the next generation so that they can all move one step closer to Jesus. Over the last number of decades, I've been able to spend 10 years, a little over 10 years as a youth pastor, before then also stepping into a role of denominational leadership, and saying, how do we really effectively reach and engage and disciple the next generation? And one of those things I really saw was that we really see our children and family ministry, our youth ministry, and camping ministries really work closely together. When we actually see the partnership of three, and we see this development and discipleship process, we can see significant health in the long-term trajectory and the reaching out of young people. Over those years, since I began in a leaders and training program at a camp, I continued to make every summer also a time that I would spend at camp. I actually, in every job that I had as a youth pastor, I also wrote into the job description work that I would have at least anywhere between 2 to 4. Some of them allowed me up towards of 8 of 10 weeks to invest into camp. And then eventually in my role with the Canadian Baptist now, I took on the role as the executive director of Camp Quasant. As part of a larger thing to say is churches, for our youth ministries, if we engage with camps, we'll see our youth ministries be healthier. The reality is that camps need the local church. But I also really believe that the local church needs camp. When we actually see where we're going in terms of our country, in terms of trajectory of young people and engaging with the faith or disconnecting, there's a unique place that camp can play in their lives. People often ask me, Matt, why does camps have such a significant life-changing experience in young people? And I really believe that actually when I unpack Acts 2:42 onward, we begin to see something here that's lived out. Let me just read it for you here. It says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe and at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and they had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes. They ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who are being saved. It strikes me of how much of this early church is seen in the way of camp. We live all together. We are meeting together in our homes, our cabins daily. The idea that at camp, the only personal private space you have is your bunk. Everything else is shared in common. You're eating the same food. You have access to the same activities. It really breaks down a lot of barriers and says, hey, we are all in this together. The chance of being able to engage in God's word daily, to the fellowship of gathering with other believers, to be able to see the signs and miraculous work of God. It just takes one moment of getting kids out into a field to look at the stars at night when they don't have the concrete jungle around them and they get a little bit more of a glimpse of their creator. It's when you can take them through the greens and you say, look at the number of greens and shades of greens that you can see here. Photoshop has nothing on what God can create with the shades of green. And when they begin to see a taste of God as creator, and you open them up into the word of God and share life together, a day-to-day, it's something where they see it more, where it's more caught, the experience of Jesus, than just taught. But we're intentional of teaching all the way through, and that they're breaking bread, the idea of being in prayer together, and that the Lord adds to their number daily those who are being saved. Well, there's 5 areas that I want to unpack in the next little bit together about engaging with camps and the difference it can mean for youth workers who are able to take this and be intentional in their strategic plan for their ministries of how they can invest and partner with camps. First area I want to dive into is that area of discipleship. We've just looked at the idea of what does Acts 2:42 have to say of the idea of let's get into studying the Bible together in a way where they're meeting with peers and they're actually hearing a lot of dialogue together. In many cabin settings, it's the idea of actually, rather than all the chairs being faced forward, it begins that way. But like we know in youth group, we shift into a small group where the chairs turn in together in the cabin around the bunks. There's something to do at night as well, when they're just wondering through and like, where's that freedom to ask questions? And they ask a ton of questions about faith. I think that's one of the open doors for us as youth workers to look at it. Where's the Q&A opportunities that we have in our day-to-day youth ministries for kids to just be able to ask questions? And camp tries to foster that kind of environment. It's a way that they're also seeing faith practice lived out in the day-to-day. What does it look like, not just at a program on a Wednesday night or a Friday night event or a Sunday morning, but at a camp? Young people are watching young adults and go, what is it to walk with Jesus in your everyday? What is it to walk with Jesus in terms of making decisions, just daily decisions? How do you navigate difficult situations, conflict management? What does it look like to be a Christ follower? Why do these young adults choose to walk with Jesus? And I think a lot of young kids are going, there's something to that when I get to see it lived out. And camp is that immersive experience where your young people from your church, from your community, are actually able to see it lived out. And so that's one of the things that often those who are not, who are just connected to your youth group as well, one of the things that I found is I encourage youth in my youth group, like go to as many like different camps or whatever. Because one of the things that they also got to be exposed to is that they knew their small group leaders loved Jesus. They knew their youth pastor loved Jesus. They knew that their peers, many of them were following Jesus. But all of a sudden they got into the camp and they looked around, they said, we're not the only ones wanting to follow Jesus. They're all of a sudden encountering different leaders who are saying, yes, I want to follow Jesus. They're seeing peers that they've never met before, new friends that are saying, yes, I want to explore faith in Jesus. So there's something unique about the discipleship process. But this is why we need to engage with camps, because for the discipleship process to happen, is that it needs to be found in the local church. It needs to be found in the way that we're living it out. So camps need the local church because many kids will discover Jesus, but who's going to walk with them? And one thing we're finding is that young people, they don't follow an organization, but they'll follow a shepherd. They're willing to be led in a place where they feel safe, trusted, and belonging. But Jeremy said, try to find this church and connecting to this youth group can be a disconnect. But if they're able to build relationships with people at the camp that are connected into a local church in their area, it's a much more likely to make that shift in. As a youth pastor, I used to ask all of my small group leaders if they could even give 1 week to serve at one of the camps in the surrounding areas where I am here in Toronto or up to the Muskoka area, which we have a number of camps in that area. I said, encourage you to even use your vacation week. I know you guys are volunteer. And many of them took me up on it. And what that opened up the door, and as part of why I always asked my church to bless me as a missionary into the camp area, was so that I could be able to build relationships with kids who are far from God, and then have a natural connection point for how they can now get connected back to a local church. At the time, I was also working in a multi-site context. So there's a number of places that I would be present at that I could help direct them into. So it's part of a discipleship reason to engage with camps. Camps need the church to ensure that kids continue on, that camp doesn't just become their church and it's all they know, and like kids wait for the next summer to get reconnected with Jesus. We need people in the church actively involved in helping them follow up and connecting them to the local church. Second area we'll look at is evangelism. Evangelism actually is one of those things of like, what's the on-ramp? What's the tent making experience that's going to help kids come to Jesus? We know that there's more and more of a barrier of them entering into the walls of the church or into the walls of the program. It doesn't feel like neutral territory to them, even though their friends invite them out to an event or to a Bible study or to a gathering. It's often felt like, well, I'm now entering into your territory where you have an agenda. And I can't explain it exactly why, but for some reason, camps have continued to hold a belief to parents and to kids as it's a neutral territory. There is no doubt about it. I know up at Cherith, where Joey works, where I'm at Quansand, where I'm at friends at Pioneer Camp, Minneoi, Mediba, a number of camps all around. They don't shy right away from sharing the gospel really clearly. And yet we continue to have a number of families that have no faith background. They're like, I just want my kids at a safe place, it's a good place. And the Christian camp seems like a good, safe place to send it. So it's seen as a neutral territory. And it's a place that's easy for friends in your church or the kids in your youth group to invite their friends to, hey, do you want to come to summer camp with me? When I polled the parents of unchurched kids, why do you want to send them to Quansand? The number one thing was, it just looks like it's fun for my kids and I want my kids to have fun. I'm like, hey, if fun is your on-ramp to why your kids are going to hear about Jesus, we're going to have a fun place for you. But then they walk away. And I had one experience of a parent who called me up. This is a message, Joey, you'll relate to this. As an executive director of a camp, where a parent calls me up and it says to me, I want to talk to the executive director. They phone the office. Like, oh, great. My daughter was at your camp last week and I need to talk to you. Oh, man. Pick it up. And the first thing she says to me, she says, I am not a Christian. My kid only went to your camp because her friend went to your camp. And her dad and I are not followers of Jesus as she says that she is. She has come home and said that she is a follower of Jesus. And I want to let you know that I don't know what to do right now. Like, oh, okay. Says, our daughter came back and she's different. And she's choosing to follow Jesus. I don't know what that means. I don't know what to do with that. It's not something that her dad or I are into. We're not religious people. We're never going to be religious people. But now I've got a religious kid. Can you help me understand how to parent a religious kid? That was not what I thought the phone call was going to be about. But she said, one of the things I appreciated was that your camp didn't make us as parents out to be evil because we didn't raise them up to be religious. But you let them make their own decisions. And that's what we've always tried to allow our kids to do, is make their own decisions. So she's made her own decision this way. Now what do I do? So I found that camps created a unique place where parents still feel safe, even when their kids make different choices than what they have as families. But to say, how now do I raise them? And that's where we need to connect them as we talk to discipleship into the local church. I love at camp because camp's one of those things where that faith is more caught than taught. And they can't figure it out. And they're trying to figure out, why am I moving closer to Jesus? But they're seeing that it's lived out, that it's not just a book of rules that I'm trying to follow. It's not just a doctrine I'm trying to understand. But they see a youth a leader. They see a cabin leader. I'm like, I want to be like that. What do you have? And they get to hear story after story of God's work. And then we go, that's the on-ramp. I think that partnering with the churches that most intentionally get their young people to bring their friends to camp is one of our greatest evangelism tools. And if we can make that an intentional strategy of how do we equip our youth in February and March to find 2 or 3 friends that they're going to bring to camp, and find a camp that aligns well to your doctrine, to what you value, to those important things, and say, hey, how do we even help you get there if need be? Bring those friends there, and then have an intentional plan about how do we actually follow up? Because I think it's an incredible en route, and that can be part of our mission. Is actually camp becomes the extension of your ministry of saying this may be one of the most effective ways of evangelism. We take the neutral place and then help integrate them into the life of the local church through relationships that they have. So we've looked at discipleship and how important it is for the church and camps to engage together. We've looked at evangelism and how integral these two parts, when they work together, the church and the camps, can be a strong en route and then a strong follow through. And then it goes into the area of leadership. Camp gives young people the opportunity to lead unlike any other. I think maybe McDonald's might be the only one that actually gives a better en route to equipping and trusting kids younger than they really should to take leadership, and the amount of training that they do to equip them from 14 onwards. But take McDonald's out of the picture, and I actually believe that camps might be the forerunner of trusting young people with incredible amounts of responsibility, and equipping them and training them, and then saying, we're going to run with you. The thing is that they get the whole summer of literally being trusted to invest into the lives of kids, becoming literally their guardians. And then they come back to the local church, and the church goes, we'll trust you to hand out the bulletin as people enter into the church. We'll trust you to be on the worship team. So they go from a place of, we trust you to lead in all these areas and to create these things. And then they come back, and it's like the rest of the business world is already hungry for Generation Z and says, we'll give you opportunities to lead. And the church will say, well, we're going to keep coaching you and teaching you so that you'll be able to eventually lead later on. The thing is, how do we actually mentor them? Not just throw them into leadership, but to say, you've got great people coming back from camp that have been highly trusted, highly equipped, and have taken on significant responsibilities, and go, how do I now follow that up? I think it's one of the gold mines that churches have and youth ministries have of our student leadership. Find those who have a camp experience, and you're going to see them thrive in what they can create. Their innovation and their creativity is unbelievable. They have to be innovative. They have to be creative. I can tell you that because camp people right now are having to be more creative and more innovative. Today marks the first day in over 15 months that overnight camps are no longer closed. And so we finally are open. Now, many of us, myself included, we pivoted to a different model. We're grateful for those that are going to be able to continue on and say overnight camps can happen tonight, like Camp Cherith. And we're grateful for what that is. And so we're going to be doing a family dynamic of how to pour into the families and develop young leaders. Others are going to be able to do overnight camps. We're going to pray for the safety right across the province and the country, that these overnight camps that are so critical are going to be able to thrive. But I got to tell you, camp people have had to learn how to pivot. I'm tired of that word, but anyways, I threw that out there. That we've had to be innovative. We have to figure out how we're going to do this for the sake of the gospel and moving kids closer to Jesus. We'll do whatever it takes. And camp people are ridiculous that way, and innovative and resourceful, and often go, we have no money, but we've got to figure out how to be really impactful. And that sounds a lot like youth ministry. We have no money, but we want to be highly impactful. Let's lean into our camp folks and those leaders and say, how can you lead? How can you lead in the amount of what you come back, those that have been video people and creating great promotional stuff or great innovative stuff, fun theme videos and that kind of stuff? How do we get people who have spent time really listening to campers, have that more almost of a counselor side? They're not a professional counselor, but know how to listen well and empower them to listen to stories of their peers to support those who have passions to serve in different areas of service. How do we bring them back and really give them leadership opportunities? With this, I also encourage, there's something about being able to make sure that we integrate them back into the faith community, because when they have been trusted with leadership, sometimes they feel like, hey, is this a disconnect? And celebrate them. Every year I try to, in June, actually have a commissioning service to those that were going to camp. And those that would stay in the city, I would commission them as, how are you missionaries to your peers during the summer or your workplace? But if you're going to camp, how do we commission you as missionaries to camp, to be intentional, to live out Jesus? And then when we came back, we welcomed it back, and that our celebration back was, every year was, tell us the stories of life change that God let you be part of. So rather than actually driving our first week back around, here is what I'm going to teach you, they actually got to teach each other from being missionaries, quote unquote, is almost like the missionaries report. But these kids are more getting to talk and hear about their summers. And it created an excitement of, This is why we invest into camp. And by February or March, we're going to be looking again at how you as student leaders can be inviting your friends to camp. How do we help younger families in our church be able to help their younger kids get to camp and work with the kids ministry program in that? So that's the investment into leadership, to say, recognize that there's great leadership there, pour into them. And tie into that, if you've got small group leaders that can go to camp, it's going to be a valuable asset for them, even if just a week. They'll come back more invigorated, creative, and passionate about sharing life with the next generation, and they'll get more and more. If you follow a model of mentoring, I'm really passionate in youth ministry that we do mentoring, that the idea that we live life with the next generation, not just on a Sunday, not just on a Wednesday or Friday, but how do we live life with them, and that they see it lived out in the daily decisions. How do we do finances? How do I have a healthy marriage? How do I figure out Jesus in the midst of conflict? And that, how do I have relationships with friends who are far from Jesus? All that lived out. But it gets that idea of, I'm just going to live life with the next generation. When I can get youth leaders up to camp, even for a week, and they walk back and they're like, I want to do this like all year round now. Like, this is so invigorating to just pour and walk with them and be in the cabins. And I was like, I told my youth leaders, I don't want you to be on a program team. I don't want you to be waterfront. I don't want you to be on any leadership. I either want you in the maintenance crew, and so you just radical service, or I want you on the cabin lines. I want you to serve camp as the cabin leaders. I really think that that's the front lines. Like, if I could totally overhaul the camp model, which I've always tried to still do from my seat, but I love my oldest, most mature people to be all my cabin leaders. It's like, first of all, you got to be a program person. You got to be a lifeguard. And then when you show the maturity of out of program, lifeguarding, activity stuff, eventually you're allowed to now lead in the cabin lines. Like, I feel there's something there about the front lines, but that's why I try to get my small group leaders into that. So that leads me in my fourth area for engaging camp is actually for professional development. Joey, you've chatted about the importance about professional development. Yeah, as you see that there's two or three segments coming up for professional development around calendaring, around apologetics. Lean into these. We need to do professional development. I'm a big fan on this. It's the reason why I've continued now for the last 20 years to run the Today's Teens Conference, is that the professional development, the medical world, they will pour themselves hugely into professional development. They continually do that. My doctor, if my doctor says, hey, I've got a lot, I really care about health, and health is important to me, and I really want to value health, and I'm going to do my best for you. Like, that's nice, and that's great. But I actually really want my doctor to be up on the latest trends, equipment, resources, knowledge, and what's happening in the medical world. So I'm hoping my doctor is continually doing ongoing professional development. Even though they got their degree, they've got to keep working. And they've put 7 years into it, and then they got residency, and then they got to keep going to conferences and trainings. We as youth workers are responsible for not just the well-being of kids, but their spiritual lives and speaking into them during a pivotal year. How is it all the more important that we don't stop getting professional development? That we don't just say, I like the next generation, I love Jesus, and I'm just going to do my best at it. Let's pursue as much professional development. And this is the reason why I wrote into my contract as a youth pastor, became even more important when I was running a multi-site youth ministry, that I would have 4 to 8 weeks allocated for me to go to camp. People thought, this is ridiculous. What's going to happen to your youth ministry? I said, those 4 to 8 weeks, I became a cabin leader. I became a small group leader at the LIT program. We were like, but you're running a multi-site youth ministry, but you're the youth pastor. And I'm like, that was the greatest thing that happened to me, because I remembered in those weeks, what did my small group leaders need? What did they need to hear from me? What did they need to be encouraged by? Because all of a sudden I was back in the role where I wasn't running point leadership on the youth ministry anymore. I was in a role to serve the leadership, serve those who had vision to go for, and say, how do I come alongside what you're doing? And also I realized I can now teach and engage different language and better equip my small group leaders and my youth leaders, because I kept going back to that stage every summer to rethink that. On top of that, hanging out with camp people made me more creative and innovative. And it also gave me time to hang out with a number of unchurched or those who are on their way to God youth, and hear what they were having to say and their concerns. So it set me up to go, okay, I know this is almost my professional development, and I'm using the summer to recharge, and then I could use my August to prep, calendaring. Way to go, Joey, on that. Know your plan going into it. Let's nail it, and then you roll it out. And camp became a huge place. And so I talked to the church, and I have a whole strategic plan that I presented to them as to why that this was actually a worthwhile investment, to see me engage in that way. It allowed me to also see many young adults at camp don't actually sometimes have a church, home church that they've been connected to. They grew up at the camp and they go there. I got to find some of my best leaders that became my small group leaders, and I was able to get them back connected to the local church. So if you're there as a youth pastor, it also is a great recruiting way of helping young adults who may have drifted from the church but love camp, bring them back to a love for the local church, and who are very gifted and love Jesus and that kind of stuff, but they're missing a key component, which is always being part of the faith community. And you can actually help them come back into the church and then also be great leaders, as camp people tend to be. And so there's a professional development of why we engage with camps. Is why I've seen a great thing. And then the final piece of engagement with camps in the church is the idea of seeing it as a mission agency. What I mean by this is that if our churches could say, you know what, here is a camp or a couple of camps that we are going to financially invest into. Camps, no doubt, need financial support. I can speak from a personal side of things, but across the board. But churches, what I really say to them is, hey, invest into camp on a couple of fronts. One, financially, and then we'll report the numbers of kids that came in. In 2019, we had over 200 kids make first-time decisions for Jesus. I told every church that invested into Kwasin, make sure you report that in your annual report. You were part of making that happen. That's part of your storyline. And your church needs to know that the investment that they made is actually helping kids come into relationship with Jesus. So as you partner with these agencies, have that be part of actually your mission. So see camps as a mission agency, and to the strategy of evangelism, be able to tie in their results to be able to tell your larger church, this is what we are part of seeing life change happening in. Secondly, send students literally as missionaries. I used to ask the church that I was part of to fund 3 or 4 people to be full-time covered. So this is before Canada Summer Jobs, and we know for some Christian camps, it's very hard to get Canada Summer Jobs. But as a church, let's put aside a budget. Actually, we're gonna, as we invest into missionaries that go around the world sharing the gospel, the most unreached people group in Canada right now is the next generation. Generation Z, most unreached people group. So we literally could be sending missionaries to camp to reach the most unreached people group. So we get framed to our churches, what is it to have 2 or 3 missionaries, young adults who you send on behalf, you fund them to be able to invest their summers into leading kids to Jesus, and then be able to report back to the church what you're doing. And then finally in there as a mission agency is to be able to share stories of transformation. Camp actually, Christian camping isn't actually in the business of camp. They're actually in the business of spiritual transformation. We just happen to think that camp's the best way to do that. So we're able to do camp as the open door. And churches are the forerunner, and youth ministries are the forerunner of encouraging and ensuring that lifelong transformation is able to happen as it lives out year round. So what we recognize is that the church needs camp. Camp needs the church. When we walk closely together as youth ministries, as children and family ministries, and as camp, we can have the healthiest and most impactful response as we look at the areas of leadership, discipleship, evangelism, our own personal development, and really seeing them as a mission agency together to see more of the next generation across our country who have often seen walking away from Jesus, draw them back to a relationship with Jesus and into the community of the local church. And that's some of the stuff that I get passionate about when we talk about engaging with camps as youth workers.